All right, everybody who's joining us right now, we're going to give everybody just a minute or two to log in, and then we will get things rocking here in just a second. All right. Aaron, what do you think? Should we just get things rolling here?
Let's do it.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys, thank you very much for showing up today and signing up. For everybody who is maybe joining a little bit later, if you guys have any colleagues that wanted to join today but weren't able to make it, we are recording this today. So if you signed up, anybody who signed up via the landing page, Kendrick and our team will be, once this whole video compiles either today or tomorrow, we'll be sending this out via email. So you guys are welcome to share it with anybody on the team or anybody else that wasn't able to make it today. But we'll go and get things rolling here. What I want to do today is, first off, this is not going to be like an hour-long webinar or anything like that. We want this to be, and we have constructed this to be, a very high impact, very specific training, specifically focused on upsells. And so what we're expecting here is I'm going to take, give or take 15, maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes probably, to sort of walk through the strategies that we have seen to be the most successful when launching upsells. And we're going to walk through some very specific use cases, some very specific ways that you should be launching your upsells across the site. And then we're going to take a few minutes, and I'm going to let Aaron from Rebuy walk you through a very cool, very new part of the upsell tool. And it's something that we're really, really excited about. And frankly, it's what makes everything we do possible. So we'll talk about that as we get into it. But the title of today's presentation, today's training is how to increase revenue using upsells. So we're going to keep this very, very straightforward. The most important piece about this is that it's guaranteed. And what we're going to do today is we're going to show you very specifically how do you launch upsells in a guaranteed way that it's actually going to improve revenue. And it's going to improve revenue without hurting conversions. And this is something that has been a constant problem with upsells and a constant issue. And we're going to talk about that today. And we're going to talk about how to avoid that, how to ensure when you do launch upsells for your brand, you're doing so in a way that's actually guaranteed to drive more revenue. So we're going to go and jump straight in. And we will have some time for Q&A at the very end if I get through all of our topics here fast enough. So if you do have any questions, just hold them until the very end, and we'll let everybody sort of add those questions into the chat in Zoom, and we'll tackle as many as we can today. So first off, who am I? Just give you guys a very quick introduction. My name is Alan Burt. I'm the founder and CEO of Blue Stout. Blue Stout is a firm that is focused specifically on improving conversion rates, improving revenue, and we do it specifically for direct-to-consumer brands, mainly that operate on Shopify and Shopify Plus. So the way that we always describe it to folks that don't know who we are is that our services perfectly combine data-driven CRO testing with a brand-focused design team and a Shopify Plus development team. This is the core of what we do. The other way I like to describe it is if you ever saw the movie or read the book Moneyball, we are Moneyball for e-commerce. This is our approach. We're data-driven. Everything we do focuses very specifically on understanding how customers move through your store, identifying the points of those customers are falling off in the customer journey, and where are there opportunities to make these micro incremental improvements across the entire store so that you're guaranteed to increase the amount of revenue that's being driven from your existing traffic. So we're not one of those just design and hope it works, cross your fingers. The idea here is we take a very data-driven approach to ensure that everything that's being done and optimized on your site is actually improving conversion rates, improving average order value, and ultimately improving revenue. So that is what we do. Just a few of the brands that we've worked with. Our core, we tend to work primarily with 8-figure brands between 10 million to 100 million. We've had lots of brands that are above that and multiple 9 figures. We've got a bunch of brands that are at the 7-figure level. But our primary focus, where we see the absolute best impact, is typically with 8-figure brands, specifically on Shopify Plus. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about upsells. So first off, why do we care? What's the point of even having an upsell? Most of you guys know the basic value, right? At the end of the day, we want upsells so we can increase average order value, right? Somebody's coming and buying one product, we want them to buy 2 because we want that average order value to be higher. It makes it easier for us to acquire customers at a higher CAC. And ultimately, we want it to increase revenue. That's ultimately the goal. So I think the selling proposition of why you want upsells is pretty straightforward. And upsell, we'll use the term upsell here pretty much the entire presentation, but want to note that there is a difference typically in terminology between what's called an upsell and a cross-sell. Upsell is typically a scenario where we're taking somebody who is buying a product and we are then upselling them into a better version of that product or to a higher order value of that product. So a good example would be if you're buying a supplement, and maybe it's a sleep supplement. Maybe you're also then upselling somebody into a bundled product that would include the sleep supplement as well as maybe like a multivitamin, right? So it's a bundling solution. It increases the order value. That would be upselling somebody. If somebody's buying a version of a product, then maybe there's a more enhanced version of that product, sort of upselling them into the more advanced or higher price point version. That would be different than a cross-sell. A cross-sell would be literally selling them onto a completely different additional product. So if you're buying a pair of shoes, we're going to cross-sell you on a shirt or a hat, as an example. And cross-sells can either be sort of complementary to the original product, or they could be completely unrelated and just something that maybe you may also like because we saw you bought a pair of shoes, a shirt, it seems like a good fit. So we'll sort of use the term here interchangeably, but we will be talking about both upsells and cross-sells during the presentation today. Okay, so this is the main reason we're having this conversation, is the problem with upsells. And this has always been the issue. And the issue that we see with most brands is that they think or they know they want upsells and they just arbitrarily start to slap upsells across the site, thinking it's going to improve revenue and improve AOV. The trouble with upsells is that, one, historically it's been very difficult to measure, right? You may throw an upsell on a product page and yeah, maybe you do see an increase in AOV, but it's very difficult to understand the impact when you are not comparing it to an equal baseline. And what we mean by that is, let's say you had an upsell and all of a sudden you start to see your AOV uptick and you go, okay, this upsell has been a win, but maybe AOV would have gone up anyway. Maybe it's a seasonality change, right? Maybe you're just getting closer to the holidays. Or maybe if you sell summer products, you're just getting closer to summer and AOV goes up anyway. So the idea is that it's been very difficult to pinpoint the changes and success metrics around upsells to know whether or not it's actually moving the needle for you. Because the downside is it actually can move the needle in the wrong direction. And we've seen this happen significantly especially for larger brands. Smaller brands sometimes don't notice the change, but larger brands do because they're doing so much revenue. But upsells can hurt conversion rate. And so let's say you put an upsell on your cart or an upsell on the product page. It's a friction point. It's another decision point that a customer has to make. So you've taken them mentally out of that purchase funnel experience, that step-by-step process they're already in, and you've given them something else to think about, and making them think about something else can make them fall out of the purchase funnel and ultimately not convert. So adding that little extra decision-making or friction point can hurt conversions. And at the end of the day, if your upsell only increases AOV 10% and your conversion rate decreases by 20%, you actually end up with less revenue. And so that's what this graph here, very simple sort of kindergarten level graph here, is supposed to explain, is that at the end of the day, just simply increasing AOV is not guaranteed to increase revenue, especially if you see a decrease in conversion. And understanding how much of an impact that upsell has had is very difficult to do unless you're running a very strict A/B test with a baseline on the same day, same period of time, same traffic sources. Otherwise, you're still just kind of guessing. So what we want to do today is we want to outline a couple of different frameworks for you so that going forward, you can actually implement upsells in a way that is guaranteed to increase revenue. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today. So we're going to talk about a tool, right? And this is where Rebuy comes into play. That's going to allow us to actually run these tests in a way that it ensures it's driving more revenue. But before we get to that and sort of walk through how to do it with Rebuy, first, we want to talk about a few best practices. End of the day, even if you launch an upsell using Rebuy A/B testing, yes, you're going to see whether or not it works, but we want to make sure you have all the tools in your toolkit to actually launch something that has the best likelihood and highest likelihood of being successful. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk you through a few best practices that we have found from doing this and from running upsells. And I'm going to show you exactly what to be thinking of. So when you sit down and go, okay, as a brand, we want to launch upsells. This is what we're thinking of doing. This is our hypotheses. You can run that hypothesis through these best practices and basically gut check them and make sure that what you're launching with is going to at least put you in the best possible position to be successful. And then we'll talk about how you can guarantee that with better data. And just to give you some really quick background so you understand where these are coming from, part of what we do, a large majority part of what we do at Blue Stout is we run hundreds of A/B tests on a monthly basis for our brands. And so that puts us in a very unique position to see what consistently performs across multiple industries, across verticals, or across different price points of products, across different types of target customers. And so it allows us to start to pattern match. And while we always recommend A/B testing, because it's really the only way to ensure that something moves the needle forward, this at least can show us that, let's say you're a supplement brand, in 90% of the cases, we can say that this is the best place to place an upsell because we see it convert the absolute best the majority of the time when it's done in this particular way. So all these best practices are based upon our proprietary data set from all the hundreds and thousands of tests that we have run over the years. Okay, so let's talk very specifically about where you can position upsells. And we're going to focus very specifically on three kind of key areas today because these are the most, frankly, just the most successful and also the ones that are most frequently utilized. So let's talk about the product page first. So PDP, product page, however you want to refer to it. Let's talk about some best practices that if you are thinking of or wanting to add an upsell specifically on the product page, what do you need to be thinking about? So first is above the page fold. You can do it below the page fold, right? You can put it further down the page if you want, but if we're looking at what is the most successful way to increase average order value, we want to position the upsell in a place that the consumer is going to see it, right? You lose customers as you increase scroll depth down the page. We want to make sure that that upsell or cross-sell is going to be positioned in a place where the consumer is going to see it. So above the page fold, but below the add to cart button. So we've seen this across multiple brands that we have tested that where they may mention sort of a bundled product above the page, above the add to cart button, or just a simple sort of add-on, right? Where we say, let's add this on before we click the add to cart button. I think that's sort of like a natural progression for a consumer to say, hey, look, I want this supplement, and then I want to add this additional supplement, and then I'm going to add to cart. It's actually the contrary. Having that decision fatigue or that extra decision-making point above the add to cart, we've seen actually decreases conversion rates on product pages. We actually literally just ran this test for a supplement brand recently where we didn't change anything about the actual upsell itself other than just moving it from where it was positioned above the add to cart down to below the add to cart. And that alone improved conversions and average revenue by, I think it was about 16%. So again, all these kind of small changes start to add up to significant revenue amounts when you do them correctly. So we want this positioned below the cart. The other thing that we've seen across the board and across all of our data sets is that the things that tend to work the best on a product page specifically, and this is sort of different than what you might see on, for example, like a cart, is that upselling things like bundles, right, tend to work incredibly well on product pages, or cross-selling what we call complementary products. And so what, as an example, something not to cross-sell, as an example, would be you're buying a pair of shoes, cross-selling a shirt, right? Not necessarily a complementary product, it's more of like a related product. And we'll talk about sort of the difference here in just a second. Complementary product, if you're selling shoes, might be, for example, a shoe cleaning kit, right? It's something that enhances the additional product, right? It's complementary to the product, not related to the product. So across the board, we see that upselling things like bundles or upselling into subscriptions and then cross-selling complementary tends to perform the absolute best. Another example would be if you are, for example, selling like a supplement. We'll just use that as an example. And let's say it's a supplement product that, again, maybe helps you sleep. And maybe you don't sell bundles. All you do is sell individual products. A complementary product to that might be, so for example, like a full nutrition product or a like a daily vitamin type product, right? So complementary always works best on product pages, or upselling into things like bundles always works best on product pages. Okay, let's talk about what we call post add to cart pop-ups. This is something that I think was very popular a handful of years ago and that we see less often now. I think it just kind of went out of vogue. But it's essentially an experience where, let's say you go to a product page, you choose your options, you add to cart, and before you actually get taken to the cart page or see a quick view cart, you get a pop-up in your face that is upselling you or cross-selling you on another product. So as opposed to actually having the option on the page, this is something that gets triggered only when you click the add to cart button. What we have seen across our data and our testing is that this method of an upsell does not convert better, does not convert worse than a PDP or a cart upsell. So this is something that I think, a lot of brands sort of tested and used earlier on. I think that sort of just fallen off the bandwagon, frankly, because we haven't seen any benefits doing this necessarily over any other type of upsell on a product page or a cart page. Doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean it's wrong. Just means that we haven't seen this outperform anything else. So something just to take to note. So if you are running these and they're successful for you, great. But if you're not running them, don't feel like you have to rush and create this extra experience. First, I would say test on the actual product page or test on the actual cart first. What do we see work? Also focused on what we call like related products. So as opposed to like a complementary, something that might be related to this, we see perform really well. So in the example of like, if you bought a pair of boots, related might be a shirt, might be a hat, right? So this is a scenario where somebody's already added the original product to cart. Now we're going to say, you may also like this other thing. So related products work really well in this scenario. Okay, and then finally, the last piece we'll talk about here for best practices is actually in cart. And this is one of the most successful, probably the most successful place to be testing and implementing upsells right now for most of the brands probably on the call today. And so a couple of best practices when thinking about, and in this example, we're showcasing a slider cart. So actually very similar to what you might run if you're running Rebuy, or if you're just running any sort of slide cart on your store. The couple best practices here, and some of these might seem obvious to you, but you'd be absolutely shocked by how many brands we come across that don't do this correctly. First is don't redirect to a product page. Every brand we've ever worked with that has an upsell in the actual cart experience itself that forces the consumer to go back to the product page in order to add that additional product to cart, it always hurts conversions. Or maybe a better way to say it is, when we change that experience to be an add to cart or a direct add from the cart itself without having to be redirected back to the product page, it always increases conversions and always increases average revenue. So it's a lot easier, especially if you're running like a custom slider cart, right? Sometimes it's easier just to sort of, put a product in there, redirect them back to the product page. They actually can choose their options, colors, etc. Sometimes that's a technical issue. A lot of teams have an issue building into custom carts. This is, again, why Rebuy is a great tool for this. But always make sure whatever you are adding in the cart experience itself can be added to cart directly from the cart. What do we see work really well in cart maybe versus like a product page, right? So product page, we're talking about upselling into things like bundles, right? Or upsell or cross-selling into what we'd call complementary products. What we see work really well in the cart is cross-selling related products. So in this example, right, buying a pair of shoes, this is where we'd be cross-selling into like a shirt or a hat or something that we think may also look nice, something you may also like based upon the product that you've already added to cart. And there's lots of ways to determine what those products are. I know Rebuy has sort of an AI tool that does this. We see a lot of success with cross-referencing past orders. So we'll go through past order data and we'll see which products specifically sell well with each other. And then that gives us a really good baseline for what we want to test for our clients in the cart specifically. So if we see across the board that, there's, 35 to, let's call it 30% of people who bought this very particular boot also bought this very particular shirt, that to us signals a huge opportunity to test that particular cross-sell in the cart itself. So again, we have a very data-driven approach to how we do this. I would recommend anybody who's running a cross-sell in the cart would be to look at your order data, start to pattern match what you see customers buying. For older products, for newer products, that may be a little bit of a gut decision, but always A/B test. A/B test the number of products that you're offering and A/B test the exact product that you're offering. Free shipping thresholds. If you have a free shipping threshold, sort of matching up products to ensure that they hit that free shipping threshold. So if you have a $100 free shipping threshold, upselling that, and they've added, $70 to cart, ensure that the products you're offering in that upsell would up level them above the threshold. So if somebody has a $70 product in cart, you don't want to be upselling them or cross-selling them on a $20 product. Test a $30 or $35 or $40 upsell, just so they can hit that free shipping threshold. The psychology around that is really, really powerful. And you'd be surprised. Somebody would be much more willing to buy a $30 product and get free shipping than buy a $20 product and not get free shipping. The psychology there is really working in your favor. The other thing that we have seen work really well is upselling subscriptions. So a lot of subscription upsell does occur on the product page, and if you're using a product like Recharge, right, then you're gonna have that option kind of built into your widget that's on the product page if it's been built that way. But we have seen a lot of success in upselling, single product purchases into subscriptions in the cart experience. So if you do offer subscriptions, that is something to test and look into. So that was our sort of whirlwind sort of blaze through best practices for upsells. And I'm more than happy to go through any sort of questions or very sort of scenario-based questions if you guys have any in Q&A. But the piece I want to overemphasize here is that these are just best practices, right? None of these are going to guarantee success. At the end of the day, the approach that we take is we always start with our best practices. We identify, what's your brand, what's your vertical, who's your customer base, what's your AOV and type of product. Are you offering free shipping? Are you not, right? Are there bundle products that you offer? Do you offer subscription products, right? So you have to sort of sit down and map out, what does your brand offer look like, your product offering look like, and then from there, follow these best practices to say, okay, these are our hypotheses of where we believe for your brand and your product, upsells are actually going to drive a higher average revenue per user, not just a higher AOV, right? Higher average revenue per user, and then we come up with those hypotheses and then we test. And so the thing that we are so excited about that Rebuy has launched, and the reason why we're doing this training with Rebuy, is because up until now, creating an upsell scenario where we could guarantee success was very difficult. We always had to use a tool like Google Optimize. We always had to set up, a JavaScript layer on the site so that we could actually run these two different upsell scenarios and then track that through Optimize and GA. And so it required a very difficult setup on the tracking and analytics side for us to be able to look at brands and say, this upsell absolutely improves average revenue by 10%, right? Because we're able to keep a baseline and then test the new version against the baseline. What Rebuy has done is they have now introduced an A/B testing tool within the upsell tool set within Rebuy that's going to allow you to actually run the same types of A/B tests that we used to have to build, a tech stack to do directly in the tool. And so what I would encourage everybody who's on the call today or listening to the training today is as you're thinking about upsells, don't just think about, hey, let's throw an upsell in and let's see how it converts. At the end of the day, you need to be thinking through what are the different types of upsells we should be offering and come up with a strategy to say, we're going to test these two over the next 2 weeks till we hit a certain level of significance. And we're going to go back and we're going to make our decision based upon the data. And Rebuy has made that very, very easy with their new A/B testing tool. So what I want to do now is I'm going to hand this over to Aaron so he can actually show you in the tool specifically how to set up an upsell with an A/B test and then track it to ensure that it actually improves revenue and you're not just crossing your fingers and hoping it works.
No, I appreciate that, Alan. Yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, actually, I'll just go ahead and take over.
You want to just do it? Go for it.
No, that's great. So pulling up my desktop here. So I wanted to be really practical with y'all today. So just as a way of introducing myself, my name is Aaron Roper. I lead the agency program here at Rebuy. I have experience both in the agency world, plus I was with Recharge for a couple of years. I've been doing Shopify for 10 years. I've been doing e-commerce since I was in college, which was, believe it or not, longer than 10 years ago. And we've got right here, basically, I've set up a little demo store, the 2.0 store. I use the new summer edition stuff to make it a little bit more snazzy out of the box. If you're not using that when setting up stores, definitely do. What we're going to look at today is not only how easy it is to set up and experiment using Rebuy, but also how to make sure that it is deployed on your website. So literally everything you're going to see is real time, except for the creation of the widgets. Those are really easy to create themselves on the Rebuy end. A widget is essentially something that looks like a carousel like this, but in this scenario, this is a Rebuy widget, has not been optimized for the, the theme here, because I'm just tossing it in, but you can fully customize it for every page on your website. So as Alan was able to say, we've got a tool built in that is just the A/B testing function. So it's really straightforward, and you'll see it here. So if you have Rebuy installed on your store, you'll have on the left-hand side main navigation to A/B testing. From there, you can set up, create new experiments, see which ones are live, see which ones are scheduled and draft or completed, see how they're performing. What we're going to do right now is we're going to create a new experiment. We're going to call it the cart cross-sell widget. And then you just select widget type. In the future, probably in the next couple of months, we're going to have the ability to do smart cart testing. We'll talk about smart cart in a second. So this is additional testing kind of functions that you'll have available to you. But for now, let's click widgets and go on. So when you get into here, you're first going to choose what sort of test you want to do. And that means you can choose your control. Like any good test, you're going to figure out what you're testing against. We usually just say, hey, don't show anything. That's a good control. You're not trying to prove one Rebuy widget against another. You could do that, but it's not required. And then second, what you do is you'd set up your widget that you're going to test. Now, as I said, I haven't had a lot of widgets added into here, so we're just going to choose the one that's available for this test right now. And as we see it here, it's set to 50-50. So coin flip, you're going to get 50%. We'll see nothing in the cart. And then some people will see in the cart flyout, we'll see in a second, they'll see a little widget. So this, we're going to optimize for revenue for now. So we're going to look is what is the performing better in terms of revenue per visitor as they go through. You could also look at conversion rate. You can also set a test duration that will just auto run and complete and choose the best widget and push that live. You can have up to 9 Rebuy widgets in a given experiment. Obviously, to achieve significance, you probably don't want to have 9 widgets in there unless you have all the traffic in the world. We wanted to be a little bit more flexible so people could do multiple tests against each other. You'll see that evolve over time. So going in here, we're just going to create this experiment, and I'm going to save it here. And then when an experiment is saved, it's not started yet, but I'm going to start this as well. That experiment will list on the live site here. And you'll see that it has this thing called a placeholder ID. Well, within any Shopify 2.0 store, when you go into the theme editor for widgets that are based on the home page or the product page or somewhere else, you'll be able to add in an app block for that. And so that's what's here. If you click in here, you can add in a Rebuy app block, and you just drop in a widget ID. Now, typically you would just drop in the specific widget ID. Every widget has its own ID. Here, you're going to drop in the placeholder. And so that placeholder will just drop in there if we wanted to do this. And I'm going to get rid of that in a second. I'm going to go back, but essentially you drop it in there and that would push that one live. Now, what we're going to show is what to do with this one, considering we wanted this to be on the cart. So as you heard from Alan a second ago, we've built a widget here that is based on the cart itself. And this is the rules that I set up for it. Basically, I chose to return certain products regardless of what's shown here, but you can do specific products. You can use our AI. So we have, as part of the Rebuy offer, the ability to just say, hey, what sells best with the products in my cart? What sells best considering what I've looked at? And the AI will return that back, and you can get as evolved or as complex as you want there. But the idea here is that it's going to look something like this with proper images put in here if you've applied them to your store. And then you're going to be able to add it into a cart. Now, Rebuy itself has what's called the Smart Cart. Now, the Smart Cart is just a full-featured, easy-to-use app-based cart where you just turn it on, set some settings like maybe an announcement bar or tiered progress like free shipping. So this, you could set up free shipping thresholds or you free gift with purchase or anything like that. All this stuff we'll kind of gloss over for now, but it's really powerful tools like buy more, save more, add 2, 3, 4 products of something, get an additional discount as you go up through the tier. But as we scroll down here, what you'll see is we additionally have this cross-sell widgets section. So if I reload here, I'll have the ability, if I scroll back to that section, I'll have the ability to uncheck the widget that I had in there previously and instead put in the placeholder ID. So this scenario is a little different from the theme setting. You do it within Rebuy because it's applying to the card itself. So I'll go ahead and now save it here. And all this is going to do is now on my live smart card, which if I go back over here and I open up my smart card, and let's reload real quick. If I open up my smart card, it's going to show me that it's empty. I'm going to go shop. I'm going to go pick a product. I'm going to see a Rebuy widget here that I'm not going to interact with right now, but I'm going to add this to my cart, this snowboard. And I did not set up my redirect correctly, but it would normally open up the smart cart. Let's go here. Oh, yeah, here we go. And then the test is going to determine whether or not it's going to show that, that experiment or not. Now, what I did earlier that I told myself I was not going to do before this was I was going to set this up where it is not 50-50. So the typical scenario, what you would do is if you're trying to make sure that you have placed it correctly, is you would probably put it at like 99.1 to be able to make sure that you're able to show your widget ahead of time during testing. So that was the mistake I just made. But essentially, if it was a coin flip, I was able to show that over here. You would see the widget down below like that. And it would look very similar to a carousel like this. So that literally just takes 5 minutes. You install Rebuy, you choose Smart Cart, you add a widget, you start an experiment, you add the experiment to the widget, and then you press it live. And the ability there is that you're able to test and confirm all of the same things that Alan was showing earlier. And you can do that across every stage of the website. So you can do tests on your homepage, on your product page, on the checkout if you're on Shopify Plus. With our checkout extensions, you can do it every page of the checkout, post-purchase as well. So anytime someone is seeing a product and discovering something new, you're able to test what's the best experience for them through that.
Yep, I would sort of double click on that piece, that it's not just cart upsells. And that's what I think is so exciting about the tool, is that, you know, every position, especially if you're on Shopify Plus, every position that you would think or want to place an upsell, you have the ability to not just put it there now, but you have the ability to put it there, test different versions of it, but then also track the success metrics of it to ensure that it actually moves revenue in the direction that you want it to move. And that to me is what makes it so exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw that we had a couple of questions come in through the chat. I'm going to pull it up on my end since I'm still sharing my screen.
Yeah. And guys, I'm good for another few minutes. If I know I said I think we're going to try to stick to 30 minutes. We've gone over, but anybody who does want to stick around and anybody who does have some questions specific to this, throw them in the chat. I know there was a question that came in from Brianna. Happy to answer that right now. Anybody else, feel free just to throw tests in, and I'll tackle as many as I can here over the next few minutes. So Brianna, you're asking, is there any data that supports or shows that if bundles with a discount maybe is more successful than offering like complementary products with no discount on a product page, if I'm understanding your question correctly? And so I think the short answer to that question is that yes, there's a lot of data, but it's not conclusive as to make a blanket statement that one is better than the other. So it's very, very brand specific, very offer specific, very discount specific, right? So the level of discount you're going to offer on that bundle versus what the price point of the complementary products would be. So there's a lot of variables there. So the very short answer to that question is no. That's a scenario where this is actually a perfect scenario where for that type of an upsell scenario or cross sell, you would want to A/B test and very closely monitor and track changes in average revenue. So, the consumers that are, baseline, say no upsell, or baseline with one of those upsells, does it actually increase average revenue? Not just AOV, not just conversion, average revenue. That's the metric you need to be monitoring. Okay, then somebody's asking about recording. Yes, we are. This will be sent out as a recording either today or tomorrow once Kendrick and our team compiles it for everybody. How long do you typically run an A/B test for? So it depends a little bit on the brand and how much traffic volume you're driving. So assuming you're a brand that drives at least 50 to 100,000 sessions a month to your store, the period of time we typically like to run a test for is about 2 weeks. Even if you're, say you have 1 million, sessions coming to the store a month. The reason we still, unless we see just something just like dramatically winning over the other, like just blowing it out of the water, we typically like to run tests for 2 weeks at a time for a couple of reasons. One, it accounts for any sort of weekly cyclicality that might occur. And just like one example of that would be like payday. So you'd be shocked by how fast for certain brands, certain products, certain price points, the payday occurrence will dramatically change the results of an A/B test. We've seen this a lot like in automotive, like carports, funny enough. So that, in a 2-week pay cycle, you'll see a dramatic uptick in revenue or dramatic change in conversion results by factoring in payday. So regardless of traffic and the amount of traffic, we typically like to try to run tests for 2 weeks at a time if we can. Okay, Clint got a few great tips and came up with a few other things to try. I think you're just saying thank you. Awesome, no problem at all. Happy we could help. What is a bundle or single product cross-sell functionality PDP? So this is from Sasha. So once a customer clicks on this upsell button before clicking add to cart, do both the main PDP item and the additional item get added to cart? What if they click that button after adding the cart? Okay.
Yeah.
I think this is more of a question on Rebuy. But Aaron, why don't you take that one?
Yeah. So when I was on that one side a second ago, I was showing how you had to add to cart and then it had like the product add-ons below. Those are, if you check the box with that, when you click add to cart, it's all of the items. It's the PDP item and it's the product add-ons. There's also another product with Rebuy that is called a dynamic bundle, which basically already has those pre-selected. And so a good test, for example, if you're testing 2 widgets against each other, would be a product add-on versus a dynamic bundle. Similar functionality, could have similar products, but one's checked and one's not. And does that help or hurt conversion, for example? And so that's something that you can definitely test very easily in this flow. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Does Rebuy supply reports for product affinity so we can determine which products we should create upsell and cross-sell opportunities? Yeah, Donald, that's a great question. So we just launched, I'll show you. Well, I would show you, but I'm on my demo store. I'll send something to you afterward because I've got your information. But essentially, yes. Within Rebuy itself, we have a products tab and it'll pull down every product in your store. And then if you click into one of those products, it shows what sells best with it. And so we're going to continue to invest in that view. But one of the things you're able to see immediately is what sells best together. And so you'll see that there on the product by product view, but you also will see it in our reporting. Additionally, you can see like what rules that you set up on a data source, which is the rules engine that powers everything. You can see what rules apply across various tests that you do if you go into the data source and like play around with the preview on that. So I can always send out more information here. Alan and we're chatterboxes. We got a lot that we can talk about here.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm happy to stick around. I think there's a question here from John. Should the complementary products cost more or less than the original product? So if I'm understanding, meaning, let's say you're on a product page or you're on a cart, the product you've added to cart, is the cross-sell complementary product, should that be priced higher or lower than the original product? And it's, the terrible answer is it depends, right? Depending upon the scenario of what you're selling, we would want to test that. Generally speaking, as a best practice, as a rule of thumb, it's more about, is the complementary product a no-brainer, right? So like the more that product is a no-brainer solution to add on, the better it's going to do. So like you're going and you're buying an iPhone, right? It's a no-brainer to add a case, right? And so like, what do you have from a complementary product standpoint that's a no-brainer add-on or no-brainer cross-sell? And that's sort of where we typically like to start. It's like, what just makes the absolute most sense, where it's like, oh yeah, I definitely need that to go with this. And at that point, if you've got a no-brainer that's a higher price point, like, I think it's still worth testing it. So at the end of the day, you should test and see. I think the general rule of thumb would be lower, because that helps lower the friction point. It's going to make it easier for somebody to add, because it makes it more of a no-brainer if it is lower the price point.
Yeah. And I would even add in there, Alan, like you mentioned on I think even the cart slide, you said, hey, if you're trying to get over a free shipping threshold, you got $30 to get there. What do? And it's like, you don't do $20, you do $30. Right. And so that's something that if anybody here is on Rebuy, I know a lot of folks are, you can do that directly in a data source with like 2 clicks. You just, cart subtotal is this, your free shipping threshold is here, then it's going to dynamically change as soon as someone clicks the button, and you can have the right products to get them over that threshold. And it works really, really well. And so that's the kind of thing that you can test very easily with these.
And Lisa was asking, are there any apps, AI, that do not play well with Rebuy? You mentioned Recharge also as a good complement. I mentioned Recharge, I think, when we were talking about sort of subscriptions, just because Recharge is a phenomenal subscriptions product. But I'm not sure if you'd have an answer for any apps that don't work well with Rebuy, Aaron.
Yeah, I don't really have a good answer there at the moment. But yeah, I mean, we work really well with many, many apps out there. I mean, we're striving to be like the most integrated app out. We actually, you'll notice anybody that's using Rebuy, if you go into Smart Cart, you scroll all the way to the bottom of the settings, we have a whole like app directory down there of just what we call Smart Cart apps, little snippets of code from all your favorite apps that do a little something in the cart to add value, make it real easy for you to click and just turn it on. And then we keep it up to date there. So we try to keep it really like just Rebuy across the board, just really fundamentally sound with everybody else in the ecosystem.
Okay, Anna is asking, is having too many widgets bad? So for example, we have a sidebar pop-up cart, then we have pop-up for recommended products, and we also have a checkout page of recommended products. End of the day, test. Right. I think it's very dependent upon vertical, and also customer expectations. So, we'll see, for example, like very high-end luxury fashion, customers are much more sensitive to aggressive upsell, campaigns. It can tend to sort of cheapen the experience, so to speak. And so we always test and always be very careful. Other products, it's at the end of the day, if you're selling, I don't know, if you're a hardware store and you're selling, screws and upselling them on a hammer and upselling them on, a screwdriver, right? Like, if they're all complementary and they all make sense to be worked together, like, why not upsell them as many times as you can, as long as it's not hurting average revenue? That's basically my answer to everything. And so long as it doesn't hurt average revenue and you're measuring it, there's probably not too many upsells unless it's a branding question. And that comes into play a lot for a lot of our luxury brands where they want to be very sensitive to upselling customers consistently. Okay, a bunch of questions coming through. Let's see. This one's for Aaron. Love to get the info after the call.
Yep, gonna send that to Doug.
Thanks for the seminar. Can Rebuy pull the data from the reports and automate the complementary product?
Yes. So we have 2 AI-driven endpoints that are live today that can help this way. One is the recommended AI. You probably saw it in a flash when I was setting something up on the demo. That is customers who bought this also bought that. That's like based on order data from the last 90 days or so. It stays up to date. The AI is always kind of configuring and scoring everything. That's very powerful. And that uncovers complementary products, right, from order data. The other one is similar products. That's an AI that is looking at different tag, vendor, other related items like metadata on there that you've set or are working with the products to basically say, well, this product's like this other one or tends to work well with this other one. And so we've got those 2, and then we've got some other products in the pipeline here that'll come up soon that additionally add in to that AI functionality. But you could also, if you wanted to, pull down reports from our reporting to just get the line items and see how it, everything's kind of mapping if you wanted to do your own merchandising. That's the beauty of Rebuy, is it's like a spectrum. You got on one end, you got the AI doing everything, and on the other end, you're down in the nitty gritty doing all the merchandising you could ever want. So hopefully that's helpful.
A question here from Lillian. Any advice for custom products where you have to force a return to the product page? It's great. It's a great question. So I'm assuming the context here is, you're on the cart and you're going to cross-sell a product, but that product requires customization. So maybe it's an engraving, right? Maybe you sell engraved jewelry, or you're customizing the engraving on like a shirt or something like that, or knitting. So in that example, ultimately, again, my answer is always going to be you need to test it. But best practices, right? Or like always want to be able to add the product directly from the cart. There's absolutely scenarios where redirecting back to a product page might make a lot of sense. So let's say you sell a $200 piece of jewelry where you need to actually write the engraving. Maybe it's for somebody's names, your wife's name or something like that is on the piece of jewelry. $200, average order value product. Let's say the customer had come and they'd added a $10, extra chain or charm to their cart, right? And you are now going to cross-sell them on a higher end piece of jewelry that does cost more, $200, and requires engraving, right? That's a fantastic scenario where you want the ability to A/B test that and track the change to average revenue, because that type of an upsell across the board might decrease conversion rate. Likely decreases conversion rate a little bit because you're taking them back to the product page, but that dramatic increase in order value may wipe out any decrease in conversion rate and still produce an uplift in average revenue. So it's a scenario where, again, we talked about best practices today, but at the end of the day, the reason why you have to track all this is because that's a perfect example of where if you sort of isolate that, look at that brand, look at that scenario, look at that use case, yeah, I'd want to test that. Cool. Anybody else? Questions? Actually, I had a fair amount of you guys hang on here for a little bit longer.
I'm loving it. This is
great.
I
love it too. I'm happy to answer more questions. Give you guys a.
I'm just going to say for the record, I wish I had set up the thing to actually show immediately, but that was my fault for not doing the 99 and 1. So just so everybody knows, that's what went on there.
We can give you a redo.
I'll send out. We'll send out from our side information to everybody who registered on how to set all this up. And if you have any questions, you just feel free to ping me. My name's on all the emails.
Okay, we'll do a last call here. Anybody else have any questions? Also, too, for anybody who's on here, I know Aaron said they're going to send out some email. We will also be sending out the reporting. So at any point in time, if you guys have any questions regarding anything related to what we talked about today, or just in general site optimization. A lot of the questions today were kind of related to, sort of best practices or sort of scenario-based questions where I know they're very unique to your brand, as all these questions are. Feel free to send them over. We will read and respond to everything we get on the Blue Stout side. The other thing I'd mention too, for anybody who stuck around, so we've got a weekly newsletter where we every week send out one of our conversion wins, so that you can learn from it, and it breaks down exactly why it worked and how you can apply it. So I think everybody here would probably get a lot of value out of that too. Post-purchase, yeah, we didn't talk about post-purchase at all. We had to sort of keep the topic pointed. But post-purchase, is there a best practice percentage for conversion percentage you should be shooting for, and change it if you're not hitting it? So that's a question. So the question is like for post-purchase upsells or cross-sells, I'm assuming from Doug. If you're not getting a certain percentage of those upsells or cross-sells to convert post-purchase, is that a red flag that you're doing it wrong? And again, I wish there was like a benchmark there that said, hey, look, if you're not getting 10% of people to opt in, then your offer's off. It just depends on what the upsell is, right? And again, like if you're upselling a $100 order value product and you're getting 1% to opt in, that's probably better than getting 5% to opt into a $1 upsell product, right? So at the end of the day, it really is going to be very brand dependent. What I would always recommend is that no matter where you're at a baseline, always improve the baseline. The question we always get is, what's a bad conversion rate? Like my store converts at 1%, converts at 2%. Is that bad? And our answer is like, no, it just is what it is. And your next job then as a marketer is to say, how do we improve from the baseline? And so if you have a percentage, I would just be testing other offers to see if you can increase it.
Yeah, and I would agree. And then for maybe our next webinar, we have to talk about this, but for post-purchase, that is also A/B tested within Rebuy. It's through a different thing. We call it post-purchase flows. And so essentially you can do an A/B test on the first, like the initial offer right after someone checks out. And then you can decide if you want to do something else if they accept an offer or if they decline that first offer. And so you can kind of get a couple of steps out. So you see conversion kind of playing around in the different offer like depths as you go through. And that's very common to see with post-purchase, but as you've said before, Alan, like post-purchase is kind of like a no-brainer as long as you can manage like expectations with your customers around it. It's a really big win for a lot of brands to just tack it on there to try it out.
Yeah, I see very little downsides to post-purchase. There's some charging scenarios where it's like I was actually talking to somebody earlier today, where, and this is a good example where if like you're trying to upsell somebody to like a bundled product post-purchase, you can't necessarily switch to say, okay, hey, look, take this bundle, but take that singular product you already bought and remove that, and I'll take the bundle. So you're always gonna be sort of adding a product on. So there are some nuances to it, but as a general rule of thumb, it's not gonna hurt conversion, right? It's only gonna improve order value. So if you're thinking through that lens, to me, it's in a lot of ways, it's a no-brainer if you have a good offer.
Mm-hmm. You want to get Wayne's question here at the end?
Oh yeah, here we go. Any stats on the effectiveness of upsells via the pop-ups on both A2C and checkout? Any stats on the effectiveness of upsells via the pop-ups on both A2C? I'm not sure I'm understanding the question. Aaron, do you understand that?
I think so. So the idea is, how effective and what are the stats around that for pop-ups on both add to cart and the checkout. So, checkout. So when you add to cart from like a product page, for example, you can do a pop-up then when the cart opens or you go to the cart page or something like that. That's one pop-up. And then I think the other question is when you're clicking to checkout, there's a in like Smart Cart, for example, we have what's called a pre-purchase checkout pop-up. I think might have just put something in. But anyway, you click checkout and it goes, oh wait, one more thing right before you get to checkout. And so is there any stats? And I don't have anything off the top of my head about that, but I can get back to you, Wayne. That's a really, really good question though.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I don't have a good stat on like an overall stat, and on it. And I would actually be curious to see what the stat is from Rebuy. end of the day, like, and this is what we always go back to, is like, if you think there's a good, strong, compelling hypothesis for why to do it and test it and see if it improves average revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. I think we're good.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks so much
All
for
right, everybody.
having me on.
Appreciate the time. Cool. All right, guys, we'll sign off, and we'll send you guys a recording once we have it all compiled here the next day. All right. Thanks, everybody.